Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. Last week we painted up this beast of a man, and as I was painting him, I did realise at the time I had to base him, and that base had a ton of skin on it, so I thought it'd be fun to make a video about painting skin. Same as anything when you're painting, you get what you put in back out. This is just a simple contrast layer and then a highlight, whereas this is the traditional Games Workshop style of painting faces using washes. And then finally, my favourite method, layering, starting with your darkest colour and working your way up. All these methods are valid, but this is my favourite, so that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to do three types of skin: pale, dark, and orc, because there's an orc on the base. This little servitor is going to be our pale skin. I'm actually starting with quite a dark base coat of Barrack Burgundy, which is an excellent starting point. Skin has a lot of subtle variations and shades in, and a lot of that, especially in pale skin, is quite red. So starting with Barrack Burgundy and then layering up with a mix of that burgundy and Bugman's Glow is going to create a really nice base layer. The positives of using this layering method is you don't really need to go back and forth, so you always feel like you're making progress. Also, as it's such an incremental process, we can see bit by bit as it comes together, and because of that, make decisions as we go. The negatives are, of course, it's a little bit more time consuming than using a wash, but I prefer the control I get with this method. However, there is absolutely nothing wrong with using a wash. The next step is pure Bugman's Glow, and all we're doing is using these really well-defined sculpts to fill in the muscles. Every time we add a brighter colour, we're painting in a smaller and smaller area, so we leave a slight gradient between all our previous layers. Whilst painting, you should also be conscious of where your light is, and in this case I'm not talking about your actual hobby light, I'm talking about the light inside the composition, the fictional one that's above your little characters you're painting. Focus your highlights a tad higher when you get to those areas, so on top of his head, for example, where he's got that bold side, that's where my brightest highlights are going to be, also on tops of his shoulders and forearms that are facing the sky. Our next layer is Bugman's Glow mixed with Cadian Flesh Tone in a 1-to-1 mix. One thing I was noticing as I was doing this is that I was getting a little bit concerned about how bright my highlights were getting with such dark shadows so close by. This is the problem with painting on such small models. If you're painting 75mm scale models, you're going to have a much easier time because the areas are so much larger, so you can get more contrast in. However, when they're this small, at 28mm scale, it's a little bit harder because it just looks like I've added a purple line in between some of the muscles. So whilst contrast is key, don't go too far into the weeds with it. Don't go super dark and then super bright right next to each other. With some cleanup and making sure the gradients were nice and clean, I think I got away with it here, but when you've seen the final result, the shadows do look a little bit too dark considering the size of the model and the brightness of his skin. As a result of this worry, I only went as far as Cadian Flesh Tone as my final highlight. It's also worth noting that I'm no expert. I make these videos because I enjoy it, and I come up with little tips and tricks along the way that help me. Hope this helps you, and I have no doubt you'll actually execute it better than I did. The next two skins though, the darker flesh and the orc flesh, I'm really proud of. If you didn't want to do this layering method to get up to this step with these dark shadows and brighter highlights, you could of course use a wash. I'd recommend using a flesh wash initially, so Reikland Flesh Shade is an excellent example for paler skin, and then maybe add a little bit of Carroburg Crimson, which is another Citadel wash that has a slightly red tinge into the recesses. That'll add a bit of life and depth to the figure. Just a note for the face, if you add a tiny bit of Drakenhof Nightshade or a blue wash under the eyes, that can make a really realistic eye effect. First servitor and skin tone done, now let's move on to the second. Now because of how I built this base, this guy is still attached, so I had to paint him whilst the rocks were drying around him. I do apologise for that. I started with a simple base coat of Rhinox hide. This is going to be my darkest colour going on here. The basic steps are exactly the same as when we painted the previous servitor, we're just using different colours. After base coating, I made a 1-to-1 mix of Rhinox hide and Mournfang brown to layer up the muscles for our first highlight layer. With these paints, the definition is immediately more apparent, and ultimately they're actually just better paints, so I find it far easier to paint this tone of skin. Now with pure Mournfang brown, we're filling in a smaller area just to add a little bit more definition, focusing again more towards where my light source is going to be in the composition. After this stage was complete, the final step was to mix in some Bugman's Glow and create our final highlights. I think one of the things that can make skin feel intimidating to paint is actually due to the flesh paints, that's in quotes, that Games Workshop sells. The lighter skin tone ones in particular don't cover particularly well, and they often don't blend together too well. Plus they're really prone to drying out very quickly, so I know a lot of people who go to paint skin just because those paints don't want to. So if you're teaching yourself the technique, why not paint skin in this tone instead? It's far easier. Or in the next tone, which is Orc. Sadly, of the three, our Orc is obviously the worst for wear. The other ones aren't particularly great either with all those augmetics, but this one's dead, or waiting for his moment. We're starting with a contrast paint, Warped Lightning. I want the Orc skin to be really saturated in the shadows, and this is an excellent base coat. Whilst excellent in shadows, the whole saturated effect isn't really going to help us when it comes to adding him to the rest of our composition. So I'm going to do a mix of Warpstone Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone to start the first highlight, which, as well as highlighting, will also desaturate the paint job slightly. Orc skin is always an absolute joy to paint, you just can't go wrong. The sculpting definition on all Games Workshop Orcs is also brilliant, especially the new ones, so you can just follow the lines of the muscles and leave the deepest shadows a really dark green. If you wanted to keep the saturated effect, I would use pure Warpstone Glow and then add a lime green paint bit by bit. Adding the flesh tone is what's toned this green right down. Basically, this is going for a slightly more realistic effect, which I know sounds silly when describing an Orc, but this is probably how they'd more look to our eyes in real life. Whereas the more saturated version is a bit more comic booky and cartoony, which I'm a huge fan of, but given what the rest of the models are looking like in this little composition, I don't think it would work. As I add more and more layers, I'm just adding more Cadian Flesh Tone to my mix until I'm happy. You can go all the way up to pure Cadian Flesh Tone on the lips and around the eyes if you like, but I didn't here. I made this a two-step process. Simple is sometimes better, and I was happy with it. The final step was to add some screaming skull around some of the veins, just for a little bit of contrast and because it's a fun step to do. Let's look at how everybody looks all together. Everything ties in quite nicely, but our Orc is definitely the star of the show with that lovely green tone, and that's fine by me. I want the Orc to be the best thing on the base. Our lighter skinned servitor is blending in nicely and he looks like he's perfectly part of the diorama, and our other guy at the back holding the melter also blends in nicely. The main thing here is that the skin was easy, fun, and they all blend in and work well together. Anyway, that's been another video. I've been Sam. See you next time.